So maybe what I can do is at the end of the class, we can do that today.
Okay.
To give people who haven't completed a chance to do it. Okay, so part of what's happened in British Columbia in our urban environments is that there's this legacy of lost streams. And so all the streams in red, as I've told you before, are streams that are either running or don't exist anymore or running below ground in culverts at this point in time. And so the blue ones are still at the surface. And so because of this legacy, there's more stringent sort of rules and procedures to try and reduce the impacts on streams and urban environments across many jurisdictions in BC, not just in the Lower Mainland. And so if you recall, I gave you this example of the scenario where here we are on BCIT campus, and here this black entity is a proposed multi-level parkade. And so the scenario here is that the parkade would be 18 meters from the creek, which is running over here, which is currently where the parking lot is and where people are parking right now. But the question is, because this would be a new development, the question is, how wide does that riparian buffer need to be? So as soon as you go in to the city or municipality and you're like, yeah, I need a development permit, or I'm gonna do some work, I'm gonna build something new, this can trigger a RAR assessment. Here's another example of a scenario. Here is a property in white, and the home is here, and it's Gishon Creek. The edge of the property is 12.5 meters from the stream. But in a scenario where this property owner wants to build a new deck, they may need to go through the process of doing a RAR assessment, not themselves, of hiring someone to do the RAR assessment because they are within 30 meters of a stream. And the question is, well, how wide does a buffer need to be? So it's no longer about stream classifications like S1, S2, S3, and the riparian management areas. This is a whole different protocol. So part of the process is using a RAR assessment to determine the width of a SPEA. Do you guys remember what a SPEA stands for? SPEA. We tried it out. People had guessed. What does SPEA stand for?
Streamside Protection and Enhancement Area.
That's right. It's a streamside protection and enhancement area. It's analogous with the riparian management area in many ways. That same idea. It's another word. But the RAR methodology is a little bit different in that it's quite different than what we've done so far. It's a totally different approach for determining your SPEA, which is your buffer, but it also includes any measures needed to prevent a HAD. So measures are going to be additional things that need to be done to make sure that the integrity of that SPEA is maintained and that you're not leading to a scenario where you have a HAD, which is harmful alteration, destruction, or disruption, I think, fish habitat or fish processes. Oh, and I have that right there. There you go. So those are three key terms that you're going to want to make sure you understand. And like I said, RAR will apply in any of these parts of the province, but not all municipalities have adopted RAR. When RAR first came out quite a few years ago, the municipalities or local governments had the option to meet or exceed the RAR approach. So for instance, Maple Ridge and Burnaby exceed RAR methodology and so have more stringent methods for buffer widths than some of the other municipalities. Okay, there's a few acts that pertain, and one of those acts in BC is a Riparian Areas Protection Act. And these acts cover riparian areas on residential, commercial, industrial development. RAR is not applicable on First Nations reserves, in forestry activities, or agricultural activities. Okay, and by forestry, I mean commercial forestry. RAR assessments need a professional to sign off on them. What that means is a professional needs to approve it and needs to put their stamp on it. And to be that professional, you need to be what's called a qualified environmental professional. That is a member of a professional association. Those different associations can include the ABCFP, the Association of BC Forest Professionals, the College of Applied Biology, BC Institute of Agrologists, or this other one here, Applied Science Technologists. It does not include the International Society of Arboriculture, which is what an arborist can fall under that category. So the reason for that is that that's an international society versus all of these associations are regulated under a provincial act and therefore have a code of ethics and are subject to disciplinary action if the professional is being not following ethics and not doing their job properly. So you're, by the way, as part of this diploma, you can register with the ABCFP and become a registered forest technologist. Depending on other post-secondary education you have, you may be able to have other eligibilities, but that would enable you to be able to conduct a RAR and sign off on parts of it. So coming back to this scenario here for this property owner, the question is, will a RAR apply? And the ways that we determine that is first ask yourself, well, are you planning a new development? It could be a renovation, it could be a new deck, it could be a creation of a new subdivision. All of those scenarios require a development permit from your local government. And that is a first sort of yes. If we're doing something, then yes, a RAR would apply. But the other way a RAR would apply is you have to be within 30 meters of a wetland, ditch, lake, or stream. So either on your property or off your property will trigger a RAR. And the other way that this applies is if you're in an applicable regional district, and which is where RAR can apply. Of note, like Prince George isn't in here, or Prince Rupert, but they may have their own sets of bylaws that you would have to follow. So those are the 3 checkpoints, and after which, just to summarize that from a development perspective, any of these kind of activities here can trigger a RAR to occur. So we have to be really careful in municipal environments if we're disturbing soil or altering the plant communities or trails, building trails. We have to be careful about getting the proper sort of permits or permission to do the work. And again, the RAR approach is intended to be based on riparian ecosystem processes. And so for that reason, they have sort of used these kind of processes as the guides for determining how wide buffers should be. And the way, and one of those things again was these sort of graphics that we looked at earlier is some of the what does the literature suggest? Well, they use some of the features of the literature, or the findings in the literature around shade or litter fall or root strength to help guide the methodology. And it also sort of thinking about microclimate and the importance of microclimate, and that was also considered. And so by considering all those things, they came up with 5 main, again, here they have all sorts of short form features, functions, and conditions. So essentially they thought these 5 features, form, functions, or conditions, these things here, large woody debris, bank stability, channel movement, litter fall, insect drop, and shade, that these are all important functions, and these should be guiding our decisions about the width of buffers that are required. And so the RAR assessment process, if you recall, there's 5 first steps. One of them is identifying your reach breaks, determining channel width at bank full, determining the slope of the channel, determining the type of channel you have. So that would be riffle pool, cascade pool, step pool. as well as determining the site potential vegetation, whether you're going to be a tree, shrub, or just grass cover. What is the potential vegetation community on the site? Once those have been identified, we go through the process of determining our zones of sensitivity, which link back to those features, functions, and conditions that we want to maintain. And those enables us to determine our SPIA. So as an example, here is the ZOS, the zone of sensitivity for shade. And so what we have is for streams, if you have a tree potential vegetation cover, then you go out, you get measurements of your stream. So if your stream is 3 meters wide at bank full, then you multiply that by 3, and that means that your width is going to be 9 meters to a maximum of 30. If you remember with a shade, it requires a slightly different approach where you have to drag the shade down to the south to account for how the angle of the sun changes depending on the orientation of the stream. Let's see. There we go. Once you've determined all your different SPIAs, so here we have all the, zones of sensitivity. We have all our different zones of sensitivity. You would then trace a line on the most sensitive zone, and that becomes the outer part of your SPIA. So the shade over here, the red line, this would be the final decision for your SPIA at this end. But over here it changes because of the orientation of the stream. And the outer line will be the orange over here. That would be your maximum SPIA. So here we go. I've outlined it in yellow here to show you how this would be your SPIA on the ground. And the reason why it's so specific like this, in part, is because remember, a developer or someone that's trying to build on their land, on their parcel of land, I mean, they want every meter that they can have to be not in a SPIA so that they can maximize their built area or have more control over their land. Now, the SPIA is going to be measured based on your high water mark. So with RAR, they differentiate between bank full, which in this graphic here is bank full, which is defined as a 1 to 2 year flooding event, versus the high water mark, which is defined as a 1 to 5 year event. And so the high water mark is going to be the point where you now would measure your SPIA as a horizontal distance from that point, and to delineate the outermost extent of the SPIA. What's a measure? So these are additions to the SPIA. These are actions and contingencies that must be taken to maintain and protect the SPIA. These would be developed by the qualified environmental professional. They must be included as part of the RAR assessment. And those measures can include things like requirements for mitigating danger trees, or mitigating and reducing the risk of wind throw, or increasing the stability of slopes. It could also include measures for protecting trees during construction. So think of those like fenced, sort of wooden fenced areas that you often see on construction sites around trees to protect the roots and the rooting zone of the tree. So that's one example. It could be methods and approaches to reduce encroachment of people. So fencing off the SPIA so that people aren't inclined to run around in the stream and in the SPIA and trampling on vegetation or dumping garbage. It could be measures to reduce sediment control and erosion, even during the construction phase, or stormwater management. It could be measures to deal with any issues around the floodplain. So those are going to be additional provisions that are part of your RAR assessment. And those measures are going to be, each of them would be signed off by a qualified environmental professional. And it may be that you need to have more than one qualified environmental professional signing off on each. So if you have wind throw issues, you're going to get a forester to sign off on that. But if you have